Guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about what you should do after you get shredded. So, if you're new around here, my name is Connor. I'm an online body transformation coach. I've got hundreds of client results. Look, there's some on the screen there. How good are they? And I've also been walking the walk myself for over 10 years, competing multiple times in natural bodybuilding and more recently doing a photo shoot prep. Now, one thing I always like to make sure with my clients is after they do a dieting phase, after they get shredded, that they're not just going to go blow up, rebound, and end up gaining a load of fat back. That's something that's really important to me because I know that I've made this mistake many times myself. Like the first time I got properly shredded, I started stockpiling all the food, and I was looking forward to the diet being over so that I could just eat everything that I could see. I remember eating so much food like that night of my first bodybuilding show that I felt so sick I could barely move, and I was staying at my mum and dad's at the time, and I was lying on the couch, and I could just remember not being able to move because my stomach was so sore. Eventually I went up and went to bed, and then I woke in the middle of the night and I was like, I'm going to go downstairs and eat something, and ended up eating like a bowl of Cocoa Pops, and it was just like the same thing all over again. The stomach was just so full, and I gained back like every pound of fat that I lost really quickly. And back then, I had a lot of help helping me get lean in the first place, and a lot of people gave me a lot of guidance on how to get there, but nobody talked about what to do after the diet was over. So it's something that I want to help my clients and you guys that are watching this from making the same mistakes, because it's not a nice place to be, especially when you've seen yourself more shredded than you've ever been before, looking at yourself, a couple of weeks down the line in the mirror, and you've regained all that fat back. That's tough mentally. You then get stuck in that kind of phase of like, all right, well, I need to get the abs back, so I'm gonna diet again. And then you end up yo-yo dieting, and then you don't spend long enough bulking to build any muscle, and you don't spend long enough dieting to actually get lean. You end up in this no man's land where you're not making any progress with anything at all. So that's what we want to avoid, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's look at common scenario, right? So obviously you diet down hard, you get in great shape, then you take your after photos, or you go on holiday, or you do a photo shoot, or whatever it is you do, right? You spend the first kind of 12 weeks doing that, get in great shape. And at this point, a lot of people who are maybe working with a coach, they'll think this is the perfect time to break ties with them, because why not? I've got in shape. I don't need this coach anymore. I don't need to be paying out a couple £100 every month for coaching. But in reality, especially if you are someone who's being coached, this is when you're going to need them the most. This is when you're going to need the most help and guidance, because the period after the diet, the reverse diet, it's really tough. It's really tough. You're still going to feel starving. You're still going to feel hungry. So what tends to happen is, now that the diet's over, you have a few treats, just like what I done before. You have maybe a few meals out, and you enjoy the freedom. You enjoy the reins being off. And you tell yourself, you know what, I deserve this. I've worked hard. I'm just going to have a few days, and then I'm going to get back on track on Monday. And then on Monday, you don't quite get back on track. Before you know it, you're maybe in Greg's for your lunch, and instead of getting a baguette or something that might not be too bad, you're in at the steak bakes, you're in getting sausage rolls, and you're getting all the stuff that you've been missing out on after 12 weeks of restriction. And over again, you get in that cycle of just telling yourself that, I'll pick it up on Monday, but it's tough, and you don't do it, and before you know it, you get busy, you're not really looking at your weight anymore, you're not really tracking macros anymore, and you just kind of lose all control, and you could be right back at where you first started, very quickly. And I remember from my bodybuilding days, I remember one guy telling me that after a show, in one weekend, he gained 40 pounds. 40 pounds, yes, a lot of weight. That's an absurd amount of weight to gain over a weekend. But yeah, I'd love to see what he actually ate in that, and whether or not he was exaggerating, I don't know. But it can happen. In my bodybuilding days, I've seen people who maybe left the gym on a Friday, went and competed at the weekend, you maybe didn't see them for a week and they came back a week later and you're like, holy fuck, like what's happened to you? And then as I say, like people can fall in that vicious cycle of starting to diet again then to try and get lean again, try and get their abs back, and then they end up in the cycle of yo-yo dieting that in reality is getting you nowhere. And something that I'm very, very proud of is when my clients go through a dieting phase and we take them from that dieting phase into a reverse diet and we do things properly and then we teach them how to maintain. I've had messages from clients like, a year down the line when they finish working with me and they're like, I'm still in great shape, I'm still loving this, I'm healthier and the best shape of my life, and I'm still like that, I've not went backwards. And so, see, for me, that is like mission accomplished. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with my clients, is trying to get them in shape and help them stay in shape. Again, even if we go through bulking phases, it's talking about doing that in the proper way. It's doing it like more of a lean bulk rather than doing one of these bulks where you just eat everything in sight. And it's staying away from those, I suppose at the end of the day, it's these on and off mentalities, these extreme mentalities that I had when I first started. So let's talk a little bit more detail about, the problems that we come up against, because by the end of a dieting phase, if you pushed yourself hard and if you've got lean, generally speaking, your testosterone levels are going to have dropped. There's been drops of up to 70% in testosterone levels have been observed in male natural bodybuilders. And anyone that's been that lean before, they'll know how this feels. I'm going to read out the symptoms in a second, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Reduced libido, erectile dysfunction, even as a young man, that can happen. That happened to me when I did my first competition prep and I was like 19 years old and I was like, what the fuck's going on here? And it was a bit weird. No one told me to expect that. So again, it's good if you're watching this now and you've never done anything like this before. It's good that you know this going in. It's good that you know what to expect. You can lose muscle, you can lose strength, you can feel fatigued. Like I know by the end of a dieting phase, I remember the last time I competed, like walking up the stairs felt like an effort. Like taking that step up the stairs, I'm just so fatigued, I'm so low in energy. And again, yes, that's down to obviously not eating enough food, but also, testosterone levels do take a dip and that can feel pretty horrible. And then on the flip side, if you're a female, well, you can end up having some abnormalities around your menstrual cycle. You can end up losing your menstrual cycle. You can end up, struggling to really regain that after a dieting phase because, again, ultimately getting really lean. And I'm talking about people who are shredded to the bone. It's not a healthy place to be. It's not a good place to be. So, when we talk about like relapsing after a diet or rebounding after a diet, you do want to, if you've been stupidly lean, you want to gain a little bit of fat back to be in a healthy place. But you don't want to gain it all back. That's the trick. You don't want to gain it all back. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. Also, you'll have a reduced metabolic rate by the end of your dieting phase. So what that means is basically the amount of calories you burn at rest will be lower. Usually because you're a smaller person, you've got less lean body mass, but also because your energy levels, you start doing less, you start sitting down more when you'd usually be standing up. And I remember specifically during competition preps, I would be like PTing people, one-to-one PT in person, and where I would usually be standing there, be walking around, taking a few different views of them doing their exercise, I would be like leaning against the machine. I'd be sitting on the back of the leg press and I'm like, I'd have to snap myself out of it. I'd be, wait a minute, what am I doing here? And your body is just trying to preserve calories and it's only natural. That happens, okay? It's part of the process. And again, like when you're in that position, it's really, really easy to kind of want to get out of it and want to get out of it really, really fast. And we do want to get out of it fast. Like the whole idea of reverse dieting isn't to slow that process down. It's just to do it in a controlled manner so that we essentially don't lose control. But as I kind of alluded to earlier, the biggest problem comes from the hunger hormones. So you've got ghrelin, which is a hormone that makes you feel hungry. This is increased, right? And then you've got leptin, the one that makes you feel full, and it's decreased. Okay, so your body is primed for rapid fat loss. It's in a position where you can eat and eat and eat and eat, and you still don't know you're full. Bit like a Labrador, like my dog Lexi. That's what she's like. She just eats and eats and eats, and there's nothing that shuts it off in her brain that tells her to stop. And that's what it's like at the end of a dieting phase sometimes. So then we can end up with binging. We can end up with rapid fat gain. We can end up with this kind of disordered eating where we're maybe binging then restricting, all those sort of things, and it can end up being really messy at the end of a dieting phase, and that's what we want to help you avoid. Now, some people, they'll go the opposite way. They'll think they've got it nailed and they'll think they've got the reverse diet nailed, but they'll essentially just keep continuing the diet. And we don't want to do that either, especially if you are really, really lean. We don't want to do that either, because essentially, why prolong something that's not good for you, that's not healthy? Again, getting to that like body shape and getting really, really lean, it's a means to an end for either a photo shoot, a competition, a holiday, or whatever. It's not meant to be a permanent fixture. Again, like if we're talking like, let's just say like, 7% body fat for a man, for example, right? You might be healthier sitting up about 15. So when I say reverse diet and get you, like, keep you lean, I mean keep you lean as in like maybe like 15%, like a healthy place, not like a 7%, like a really, really kind of shredded lean place, because again, ultimately, it's going to come with those side effects that we talked about before. Now, there are caveats to this. There are people, like I've got a client right now who he's going through his reverse diet, and he's actually getting leaner as he reverse diets, which is pretty incredible. That can happen. There are outliers like that, okay? But, most of the time, we will regain a little bit of body fat. It's just controlling that and keeping it in a healthy place. But as I was kind of saying, people will essentially prolong their diet. They'll think they're doing everything right, but actually they're keeping their calories too low, and they'll not increase them enough, and they'll keep themselves in that position that's not really healthy to be. And then as a result, obviously they go back into the gym, but their lifts are still shit. They're not getting any stronger. They're not building any muscle. They are just, as I say, continuing a diet in a sense. So I've been throwing around the term reverse diet, but what is a reverse diet? Well, it's pretty much what it says in the tin. Because we can't just keep dieting down forever. We can't just keep our calories low forever. We need to bring them back up in a controlled manner and not go back to old habits, because like again, a lot of people, a lot of like what the fitness world refers to as Gen Pop clients. Like, I mean, which of us aren't Gen Pop, let's be serious. But a lot of lifestyle clients, that's another one that gets thrown around. A lot of bodybuilding coaches will be like, oh, lifestyle clients, like, and again, I kind of get that, to be fair, because like, bodybuilding is a lifestyle, but it's a sport at the end of the day, and lifestyle is just like, doing it for your sake of health, or doing it for going on holiday or something like that. But anyway, it doesn't matter, right? A lot of people will go back to their old habits. They'll just be like, all right, the diet's over now. Or like, even when you speak to people, right? When you speak to like normal people who know you're on a diet, they're like, oh, when's your diet over? When are you going to go back to eating normal? It's like, well, no, this is the new normal. That's the thing. Like learning healthier habits, that is the new normal. And we look to take what you've been doing in your diet phase and just build on that. Build the calories back up, and slowly but surely do this until we find a spot that you're happy with how you look, you're happy with how you feel, and you're happy with how you're performing. And it's getting the best of all three of those things, okay? It's not, again, if we just stay lean, you might not feel and perform that well. So we're not getting all three there. You might put on a lot of fat really quick, and you might be feeling better and you might be performing better, but you hate how you look. So it's getting the combination, that's the thing. And the reverse diet is kind of dictated to, in a sense, by how lean you get in the first place, because the leaner you get and the longer you diet, the longer your reverse diet is going to take. And the less fat that you lose and the less extreme your diet is, the less, like, if let's just say, if I was 120 kilos, right, which would be very overweight for me, and I dropped down to 100 kilos, it wouldn't be, because I'd still be overweight at that, so it wouldn't be as extreme a reverse diet, if you know what I mean, depending on how my calories ended up going, how low they ended up going. But it wouldn't be as much of an extreme reverse diet as it would be, getting shredded to the bone and doing, again, a photo shoot prep or a bodybuilding show or something like that. So it all kind of depends. Now, there's a term I'm going to throw about here called metabolic adaptation. It sounds very fancy, doesn't it? But generally speaking, fat loss is dictated to by calories in, which is obviously the food that you eat, and calories out, which is the calories you burn at complete rest, the calories you burn through activity, calories you burn through training, the thermic effect of food, and all these things. That's what that's built up of, okay? So generally speaking, that is the way that it works. But what happens when you eat less, right? When you diet? Well, you start to move less. You've got less energy. Your workouts become harder and they become less intense. As a result, you start doing less within them and you start to burn less calories at rest, okay? So that's kind of why when you're dieting, you need to keep digging that little bit deeper. You need to keep making changes to your diet because your body is essentially adapting to it. Now, obviously, there's only so far that will go because, eventually you're not going to get to a point where you can survive on, 300 calories a day, for example. But as you diet down, if you, let's just throw some numbers out, went from 3,000 calories to 2,000 calories, you will find that you start burning less calories. In fact, if I'm to find, I'm just off the back of my dieting phase, I just finished my photo shoot prep. if I go to my Whoop band, now bear in mind these things aren't 100% accurate in the information that they give you, but let's just look at the trends for calorie burning, right? So for the month of January the 10th to February the 8th, right, on average I was burning 2,906 calories, right? Push that to the next month, it went down to 2,528 calories. And then put it to the next month, 2,405 calories. So we can see, and actually if you go a month further, 2,398 calories. We can see that over time, the trend is going down, okay? It doesn't matter the exact numbers because I'm not exactly looking at my Whoop and then, eating 500 less calories than that. But you can see that even with that data, which probably isn't that far off, by the way, that's probably not that far, when I think of the calories I've been on, that's probably not that far away. But when we look at the trend, that's what's happening. I'm burning less calories over time. I'm consuming less, so I'm burning less. Okay, my body's trying to adapt to less calories. My body wants to be at homeostasis and wants that state of relative balance, right? But when it gets to that state of relative balance, let's just say this is calories burnt, this is calories consumed, right? When it gets to that state, then we just bring the calories consumed down, and then we just keep doing that, and we're digging a hole essentially. That's what I was calling it. You're digging yourself a hole when you go into a diet, and when you finish your diet and you're shredded, you're usually down here. You're usually all the way down here. But when you start to eat more, you start to move more. You start to have more energy. Your workouts become a little bit easier, so then you start to train a little bit harder. You get stronger. You end up doing more volume within your workouts, and you just start to burn more calories at complete rest again because you're a bigger individual again. And when we do a successful reverse diet, that's where it takes us to. It takes us to that point where we're eating more, but we're burning more calories, okay? So what will happen, again, if we're starting from the bottom down here, like what I was talking about, we've dug ourselves that hole for our dieting, right? And we increase our food slightly, right? Then the amount of calories we burn tends to come up. And if we keep taking these small increases, well, the calories that we burn keeps falling up. But if we're way down here, and we just rapidly increase the calories that we take in, your body doesn't seem to keep up the same. If we take too big a jump, it doesn't seem to keep up the same. So it's about getting those jumps right. And I can't tell you on this video how much of a jump to make up from your lowest calories in your diet, okay? I don't know. It's so individual that you've just got... I've got some clients where I can take a 500 calorie jump straight off the bat, no bother, no problem. Some clients, where I can take 1,000 calories straight off the bat, no problem. Looking at myself, I was on about 2,000 calories a day. I went away just after my dieting phase there, which, not really the best idea, but we'll talk about that in another video. But I ended up eating around about 3,000 calories a day. So I jumped up by about 1,000. I came back today, first thing this morning, weighed myself, and I'm the exact same weight as what I was before I went away. So I've got away with 1,000 calories of a jump, and that's even from poorer food sources. So there's no answer. There really isn't, okay? And again, those of you that are interested in what I'm doing, I'm going to be doing a vlog video next week talking about this and talking about my progress. But ultimately, I can't give you a number. I can't tell you how. We just need to take those gradual increases over time, see how the body responds, give it 7 to 10 days for each change to work, see what your weight's doing, see what your body composition's doing, maybe see what your measurements are doing. And if you've increased the food and everything's staying about the same, we'll take another increase. And if you've increased again, it's staying the same, take another increase. I do think your first increase should be the biggest one. And then after that, they should be a little bit like lesser and lesser each time. But, it's kind of a bit of throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. And it's hard because, like I said earlier, you don't want to be too reserved and do too small a jump. But you don't want to go too quick either and do too big a jump. So it's getting the dosage right for the person. Generally speaking, I would say if someone's more experienced diet and they've dieted down on higher food, so for example, like my calories only went down to 2,000 calories, that's, not that low on the scale of things, then they can afford to take bigger jumps. And if someone's got more muscle and they've been training for longer and they train harder and they train more frequently, then you can take bigger jumps. If you've come at the opposite end of the scale there, you've maybe not got as much muscle, you maybe not training as often, you maybe don't train as hard, then maybe it's going to be a less big jump. Then the other side of things to think about too is the calories out, because if you've been doing a lot of cardio and a lot of steps, well actually, you might increase your food slightly, but you might reduce your steps and your cardio, and again, that's playing with that balance, so please do bear that in mind as well. But it is going to be an individual to individual kind of basis, and like there was a study done on 16 people, right, where they fed them 1,000 calories more than they needed for 8 weeks, right, and within that 16 people, I've got it here in front of me, right, the some of them gained as little as 0.79 of a pound, okay, so under a pound, and some of them gained 9.3 pounds, okay, and some of them all the way in between, right? And if adaptive metabolism wasn't a thing, each person there would have gained 16 pounds, because what they say is 3,500 calories over your maintenance is what gains 1 pound of fat. But that's just not always the case, and that's just not how it works, sorry. And everyone's going to have their own individual metabolism and own individual situation that is going to decide what those changes do to you. So it is going to be very person dependent. And again, you'll get people who, let's just say, for example, right, I've got a slide from a webinar done, I'm going to put it up here, right? We've got 3 women, right? We've got woman A who's never dieted before in her life, and her maintenance calories are 2,000 calories, okay? She's been eating about that, she's been maintaining at that, right? And then we've got woman B who has dieted and successfully reverse dieted, and she's a bit more experienced, she's been training, she's got a bit more muscle, and her maintenance calories are 2,500 calories, right? And then we've got woman C. Don't ask why they're all women, I don't know. But woman C, who's dieted on and off, and she's never really got anywhere with it, she's went super low calories, and let's just say her maintenance calories are around about 1,800, for example, right? Your diet and track record and your starting point is really going to dictate a lot of that. And like, if you've had lots of failed attempts at dieting, and if this is probably why it's women, because it's more likely that women are going to be watching this relating to this. But if you've been on like 1,200 calories, you've been really low calories, chances are you've driven your metabolic rate so far down that the minute you eat over that, so maybe you go out at the weekend and you have dinner and some drinks, then you gain weight straight away. So you've almost driven, because you've had so many failed attempts at dieting, your body's just getting used to being on less and less calories. And the only thing to do in that situation is actually kind of reverse diet before you even start dieting, is start bringing the calories back up to then bring them down. And I've had to do this with a lot of clients, and a lot of female clients are like, suspicious about doing this because they've been led to believe they have to diet down on 1,200 or 1,100 or even less calories. And I'm not saying that you'll never have to go there. Again, depending on the goal, depending on the time frame, depending on the total situation, you may have to go there. But we want to almost do a bit of metabolic repair, a metabolic repair job. I've just came up with that term there. We might want to do that first in that situation when you've been, as I say, on and off diet, and you've been pushing yourself really hard, and you get that, I eat 1,200 calories a day and I don't lose weight. Well, first off, you probably don't eat 1,200 calories a day. You're probably just miscalculating or missing something anyway. But you probably are eating not that much food and not losing weight. And again, this can be why. Okay, so we need to bring them up before we bring them down. Whereas the woman who is maintaining on 2,500 calories, drop 500 calories, go down to 2,000, there you go. All of a sudden you're dropping fat. Even the woman that's on 2,000 calories, same thing, drop to 1,500, all of a sudden you're losing fat. It's simple. But it can be less simple for someone who has had poor experiences dieting in the past, okay? And again, this is something that I've found anecdotally with clients. Like, I'm not sitting here with science to back this up. I'm just sitting here with, this is what I've seen. This is what happens in the real world. And there is science to back this up, of course. You'll be able to find it. But again, I'm not going to sit here and quote you studies. I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing. I'm going to tell you what's getting my clients results and what's going to get you results. That's ultimately what's important to me at the end of the day. So, just to reiterate, when it comes to reverse dieting, taking those increases gradually rather than big increases tends to be the way to do it, okay? Too large of an increase and your body just doesn't seem to keep up. So it's getting it right, okay? So I'm going to run you through the process now. And again, I can't give you numbers. I can't give you exact numbers for your scenario because I don't know, and I've not been coaching you, so I don't know. Unless you're a client, then I do know, or I'll have a better idea. But yeah, let's talk about this and give you an idea of what the process might look like. So from the end of your dieting phase, your lowest intake, we're going to make that initial calorie push up from there, okay? So I thought of something there between scenes that would be a good idea, right? You can use a calorie calculator, right? And use it, just go online, type in calorie calculator. These things aren't that accurate, by the way, right? But find your maintenance according to that, right? And then maybe go like halfway between where you are now and maintenance is your initial jump, right? Or maybe slightly closer to that maintenance. But like, something like that might not be a bad starting point. Again, I'm trying to give you something tangible here. That's something I thought of there. But again, like I said earlier, it's throwing shit at a wall and see what sticks, essentially. And the more severe the diet, the more severe the calorie deficit, the longer you've been dieting for, the leaner you are. I suppose the faster you want to push up as well, because if you're experiencing all the side effects we talked about earlier, you're going to want to start moving just that little bit quicker and get, back to normal that little bit quicker. One thing I would say to make sure you do, I'm a big proponent of tracking the data. Obviously, I'm an online coach, I'm sitting here with two fucking screens in front of me, but I love a spreadsheet, and I think it's so useful because the data doesn't lie. The data is right in front of you, okay? So track your weight, track your weight daily, okay? Track your weight daily on an empty stomach. Do it fasted. Go to the toilet first, obviously, but do it fasted, okay? Same with your measurements, do them maybe once per week. I'd say most importantly the waist and the hips are going to be the ones to look out for. But I use measurements with my clients to figure out their body fat percentage using the navel body fat percentage. Okay, so again you can type this into Google, navel body fat percentage. For men it'll be a neck and a waist measurement. For females it'll be neck, waist and hips. Okay, and you can use that to figure out your body fat percentage according to that method of doing it. Now there's no good accurate way of figuring out your body fat percentage, but it doesn't matter. If it says you're 10% and it goes up to 11, right, well, you've increased by 1%. You know that much, right? And if it says 10%, you go down to 9, you've decreased by 1%. That's all that matters. It's the increase or decrease that matters. Take your progress photos, of course, as well. Again, take these fasted usually. It's the best way to do it because, again, it's going to give less variance between photos. I know I like to do them in the evening because I like to be a little bit fuller when I do it. But again, just whatever you do, keep conditions as similar as possible and take them in the same place. And between those things, between maybe the way your clothes are fitting as well, you'll see, feel, measure the difference, and you'll be able to see what's going on in response to what you're doing. And if you're tracking your calories as well, you have all the data in front of you to see, right, I was having all these calories, and this is what happened when I was on this amount of calories. This is what happened when I was on this amount of calories. And you'll be able to then make the changes based on that, or see if your changes are working. Make sure that you give any change that you make 7 to 10 days to see what's happening with it, okay? Because if you just give it a couple of days, you're like, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to push my food up a little bit more. You've not given it long enough, okay? You need to be patient with this. You need to give it time. Also, keep note of like how hungry you are. Hunger is likely to be high. How your mood is. Again, moods may be about to be low if you've been pretty lean. And your performance in the gym. That's going to matter as well. How strong you're feeling, how energetic you're feeling. All these things are going to matter. But as I say, like, your hunger is going to be pretty high at this point, so it makes sense to use a lot of foods that are high protein, high fibre, and a lot of volume, a lot of food in your plate for the calories. The same kind of stuff that you should be using during your dieting phase, okay? So just kind of keep that up and just kind of keep the same structure, just start increasing the foods that you've been eating before. A lot of clients will ask me, what should I eat now? I've got all these extra calories. And I'm like, the same thing. Just increase the portion sizes. Don't change it up. Don't think, oh, I've got to go change it up and totally like revamp everything I'm eating. Just eat more of the same thing. Just increase the portion sizes. As simple as that. As I say, like with your changes, give it 7 to 10 days to see what happens before you make a decision. If you lose weight or lose fat, increase your calories. Okay, push it up again. If your weight stays the same, increase your calories. Push it up again. If you gain weight, well, it might just be water weight. You're eating more food now, so it might be that. But if you're gaining more than 1% of your body weight per week for consistent weeks, then I'd probably tail it back a little bit. That's probably a good way to describe it. Just 1% of your body weight per week. So if you're 100 kilos, if you're gaining a kilo a week for like 3-4 weeks, then like, okay, maybe you've done a bit too quick. Okay, so then you want to slow it down and just bring it back down a little bit. And then once you find the most amount of calories, the most amount of food, and probably the least amount of activity for most people, that you can maintain your body weight on or your body fat percentage on, then, well, you know where your maintenance is, don't you? And you can start to push into a gaining phase. And in previous years or the last couple of years, I've been more attuned to doing more like kind of lean bulks. In the past, I've done a lot of dirty bulks, but honestly, I don't know if dirty bulks are worth the hassle. Like, I think it's good to experience one if you're like a younger guy or something and you want to experience one and see what it's like and see what response you get from it. Then great. Like I won't lie. Like the first bulk I done, the first proper dirty bulk, I got a good response from it. I built a lot of muscle in that time, so I'm not going to bash it too much. But nowadays, I'm definitely more about that kind of lean bulk, trying to stay relatively lean. Again, not like PHOTOSHOOT shredded by any means, but stay relatively lean, and then just gradual increases in food rather than go crazy and trying to eat everything in sight. If you want to push into a gaining phase, obviously you don't need to be in that much of a surplus. A bigger surplus doesn't necessarily mean more muscle gain, so just bear that in mind. And then if you just want to maintain, well, you can basically, once you've figured out those maintenance calories, you can start to like maybe remove tracking and go for a bit more of a intuitive approach where maybe you take 1 day off tracking a week to begin with, then you do 2, then you do 3, and once you're getting to a stage where you're basically not tracking most of the week and your weight's staying about the same, you're not gaining any fat, then that would be a sign that you're kind of doing well with that. And you can always go back and do diet phases if you need to as a kind of tidy up phase. But I would always recommend, like, I don't like maintenance. I think maintenance is just, you're going to end up going backwards at some point. You're going to end up losing. That's not necessarily true, that, but like, I definitely find when people have got some sort of goal to move on to, whether it's physique or performance related, I tend to find they get on better. I tend to find having that next step in front of you is pretty important. So a lot of my clients say, well, be like, right, I've done a photo shoot, I want to do another one, I want to come back with more muscle and see if I can beat last time around. That's a really cool goal because then it gives you a kind of structure and like, okay, we'll do a gaining phase for X amount of time, then we'll go back into a dieting phase. Or if it's like performance related, again, a lot of my clients will be like, right, after this dieting phase, what I want to do is try and bench press, 170 kilos or something like that. Like, whatever it is, it gives you something to focus on next. Where people go wrong is where they just keep focusing on their physique. And, again, I'll do another video on a gaining phase and how to do that. But, like, when you come out of a dieting phase, you want to take the emphasis off your physique and focus on other things because otherwise you're going to be scared to push your calories up. A lot of guys, they don't want to push their calories up because they're scared their abs are going to disappear and that's all they're focusing on. But when you're focusing on other things, you kind of forget about it. And again, we're not going to completely forget about it because we want to stay relatively lean throughout our gaining phase, but it becomes less important and we need it to be less important. Like at the end of my dieting phase there, I was taking like progress pictures like nearly daily, right? And you do become a bit like obsessed with your physique. But now that I'm out of the dieting phase, I'll do them once a week and that's it, and I'll barely look at them. And that's a mindset you need to have going into a gaining phase or even a maintenance phase. I couldn't finish this video without doing my list of things not to do. Okay, so don't do this, right? So don't ditch your coach. If you're being coached, don't ditch your coach immediately after a dieting phase. It's like jumping out of a plane, before it reaches its destination. That's stupid, isn't it? You need to let the pilot land safely in the ground. Okay, and that's what reverse dieting is all about. So if you've got a coach, whether it's me or whether it's someone else, and you're at the end of a dieting phase, let them take you through a reverse diet. Please, assuming your coach knows what to do in a reverse diet. If you're still watching this video as well, I will put a link to a resource on reverse dieting again where I talk a bit further about this, but the majority of you guys have already heard this anyway, but I'll link it there anyway. You guys can download it if you like, and you'll get all my funny emails in your inbox when you do that as well. Another thing is don't be too slow off the mark and stay in a deficit for too long. I have mentioned that a couple of times because it's really important. Don't eat too much shit. Keep your food mostly nutrient dense whole foods, the foods that you've been using during your dieting phase, high in volume, a lot of food in the plate, lots of salady stuff, just the same way you would when you're dieting, especially at the initial parts of the reverse diet. As your appetite starts to decrease, then you can maybe start to change up your food sources slightly and go for stuff that's maybe a bit more dense in calories. But certainly at the start, don't eat too much shit. Keep it fairly lean. Keep to the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your food's coming from nutrient dense whole sources and 20% come from slightly more processed stuff. Okay. One mistake I used to make every time was I would always try to eat all my clean food, like that was on my diet, right? So like my bodybuilding diet, like chicken and sweet potatoes, oats and protein. I would try and eat all my meals and then I would just eat shit on top of that. But like, well, all that's doing is like, you're eating the meals for the sake of eating the meals, then you're eating the shit on top of that, and then it's just unnecessarily upping your calories. So rather than, like let's just say I wanted to have a couple of wraps, which aren't exactly, the worst thing in the world, right? And I had a sweet potato meal planned in for then. What I would have done in the past, I would have had the sweet potatoes, I would have had the chicken, and I would have had the wraps as well, and I'd put the chicken on the wraps or whatever, right? But in reality, there's no need for me to have that sweet potato if I'm having the wraps. But that was my mindset at the time. I was like, I better eat all my meals and then I'll just have anything extra on top. Yeah, that was a good way to get fat quick. Another thing to avoid is yo-yo dieting. I talked about that at the start. It's where you relapse after a diet, you end up rebounding, gaining all the body fat back, and then you start dieting again to try and get it off, and then you get bored of dieting and you get back into a gaining phase, and then you get bored of that, and then you see yourself getting too fat, and like basically the best way to do it is to get yourself lean, reverse it properly so that you stay lean while you're gaining. Because one thing that cuts diet and gaining phases too short is because people see themselves getting fat, they don't like how they look, or they're holding too much body fat, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to diet again. So if you can stay lean throughout your gaining phase is going to need to be at least, at least 4 months long, I would say. I would say actually a minimum of 6, but, like worst case scenario, 4 months. And if you're holding a lot of body fat going into that and you're not happy with how you look, well, it's not going to get any better, is it? And that's what makes a lot of people stop gaining and end up cutting again and again, end up yo-yo dieting between it because they can't stick to either. Don't hoard food throughout your dieting phase because it's just going to lead to binges. You don't need that. And don't kid yourself on with the tracking. I see this a lot where people come out of dieting phase and they're like, oh, I had a burger from like, let's just say from like a, I don't know, McDonald's for the sake of it, right? Let's just say a Big Mac's 500 odd calories, which I think it is. And then, but they found a Big Mac entry on MyFitnessPal that's 120 and they track that. Yeah, don't kid yourself on. Be real with yourself. Again, when I was away last week, I tracked everything just to see what the calories were, okay, just out of interest. I didn't expect to come back the same weight. I was very fortunate with that, but like I wanted to see how many calories I was eating last week and what that would do to my body. And I think having that information is very important. I think it's good to have that. And if you have that information, and let's just say the same thing happened to you that happened to me, you actually ate about 3,000 odd calories or like 1,000 calories more, and your body responded well, then that's actually power to you. So it's better to know that, okay? So the more information you've got, the better. Just be honest with yourself on it. But that's it, guys. I mean, the take home of this is, and whatever you do, if you're dieting right now, or if you're gaining right now, you need to play the long game. Don't see it as, oh, the diet ending. It's like, no, what's the next steps? What do I do? What do I evolve this into next? Because if you just see it as the end of your diet, then it's only going to be temporary, okay? The results are only going to be temporary. Your physique is going to be there for life. So you're going to go through various phases. You're always going to have a diet because you're always going to be eating, aren't you? So what you do with that just varies from time to time, depending on what the goal is. And that's the way to look at it. It's a continuation. It's not a start-stop sort of thing. If you like that, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you haven't already downloaded some of my free stuff, it's in all the descriptions for my videos. We've got a free 4 weeks of coaching. We've got, what else do we have? I've actually drawn a blank there. Free photo shoot shred guide. That's what we've got. We've got bulking guides. We've got loads of different stuff. So make sure you check out all the other videos. Check out the links in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next one.